Hi, everybody. I'm here to introduce you to the Verb Collective. The Verb Collective is a toolkit um, that's meant to make it a little bit easier to get started creating interactive experiences or immersive experiences in the case of VR, um, using scripts and code in the Unity um, on the Unity platform, but to make those scripts a little bit easier to kind of get comfortable with. I don't know about most people, but for me, I'm not a natural born coder. I'm an artist and I like making things, and I have to use code, so I do use it. Um, but I'm less interested in coding well, and I'm more interested in doing interesting things. And so the idea of the Verb Collective was to make it possible to make things fairly easily and quickly. In other words, the scripts are pretty easy to just use as they are, um, create these verb chains I'll talk about in a minute, and create really complex interactions or elaborate scenes. You can do quite a bit with it. But the idea is that um, if you decide to look under the hood a little bit and see what those scripts are actually doing, start making your own scripts that are just completely independent scripts, or even making your own verbs, which is pretty easy to do. Um, the idea is that it makes it a little bit easier for you. So there's a few things that we did, some of which are maybe really effective and some of which are maybe a little ridiculous, but we're trying new things here. The idea is to make getting into coding and getting into making stuff a little bit more accessible, and to focus less again on teaching people to code and giving people an opportunity to, um, certainly from an academic point of view, rather than teaching um, how to code, sometimes what you want to teach is what's worth coding. In other words, you want to have students be creating interactive experiences and then be talking about what those are. And this is really an opportunity to kind of make that easier to happen. So let me just dive into it. The main thing to know is that the Verb Collective was inspired by Richard Serra's Verb List. It's a artwork that he did um, in the 60s or 70s. Don't ask me to be too specific, though I think it's listed somewhere in the paper. That's included in the package. But Richard Serra is an artist, and he was interested in teaching sculpture, and he wanted to give people the ability to um, have a great way to start exploring the physicality of materials. And so he created a list of verbs, and the idea is that each of those verbs would interact with each other in different ways depending on how you combine them. So to roll to twist is very different from to twist to roll, or to roll to crease, or to twist to crease. Each verb combined with another verb created these really interesting interactions. The idea was to just get people exploring that physical process, and that they would learn how to make sculptures or better sculptures through that. The Verb Collective is kind of designed on the same principle. So there's sort of 6 categories of verbs here. These are loose categories. They're not perfect. It's just that when they were all in one folder, it made it a little bit difficult to navigate. So I'm going to open up, for instance, the movement folder. All of these verbs are different ways of moving things. So there's to spin, to rotate, to return, to orbit, to jump, to face, to dizzify. Some of these are a little bit more meant to be playful, and some of them are meant to be just really functional. But the idea is that each one of them has some sort of core and useful functionality that you might ultimately want to be copying and pasting into something else. But rather than going on the internet and Googling, strange tutorials like this one, you would, in fact, have the Verb Collective as kind of like a a container for all the sort of useful little scripts and things that you might want to use, copy and paste and so forth. So for instance, to disify, it just really randomizes your rotation when it goes. And the goal of that is, yes, that's useful to do, a variety of reasons. The main thing is just showing how to randomize a rotation. So for instance, I'm just going to create a game object here. I'll make a cube. This is just the default cube. I'm going to take to disify. I'm going to turn it on. By default, it'll do the object that it's dragged onto. I can also make it disify another object if I want. I'm going to hit play. And you'll notice nothing happens. Verbs don't do anything until you do something with them. And so by default, all verbs when they load are not active. When you click on is active, as you can see, it's doing something. What verbs do is they can activate other verbs. So what I'm going to do is, here, I'll do to ascend and to disify. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to make to ascend active on start. And I'm just going to drag to disify into the triggered verb field. This is going to ascend a little bit. I'll make it not go very far. So we don't want to spend too much time on this. I have another tutorial where I'll kind of go through some of the basic, the way to kind of make these connections. But I just want to show how they work on a very basic level. So now when I hit play, it should ascend, go up about 2 units. And when it's done, it's going to resolve and it's going to trigger any verbs that are in this array. So to ascend, to disify. Oh, why did it go? Maybe I need to make the height a little bit higher here. Let's make this 20. There we go. So it's going to go up, and when it's done, it should disify. Let's just go in and look at this. It's really quite exciting to be watching this. There we go, and it just sort of disified. So you'll notice that when it triggers or when it ends, both of those verbs are now inactive, and of course they can be reactivated. If I move this down and I activate it again, it will go back up and it'll disify again. Here, let me just go back to the beginning. The basic thing is that each verb is a sort of simple piece of functionality, and that as you chain them together, you get more elaborate or more nuanced or more complicated functionalities. If you want to know what they do, you can kind of click on them, and each one has a pretty ridiculous little poem on it. At the top, there's also a list of all the poems and then the actual more meaningful descriptions in a document that's provided as part of this in a PDF, in the package at least, that you download from the asset store. This one is for to face. Wherever you go, I will find you. Everything you do, I can see. It's not that I'm creepy, but that something triggered me. The idea here is that, again, like, I can't speak to everyone, but when I look at a big wall of code, I experience something I like to call the terror. The terror is this like overwhelming sense of like, there is a lot of stuff happening here. I don't understand any of it, and I'm going to give up before I get started. I wanted to put something in it that made it clear whoever made this is probably not the sharpest tool in the shed, that being me. That's true. And just make it just a little bit silly or playful so that it's just not intimidating. The idea is every verb begins with something a little fun or silly. Just, if you're new to code doesn't have to be an intimidating or scary math problem. It can be kind of a fun, playful thing. And people that really learn to code and like to code know that that's the case. Code is a deeply expressive medium.